As you settle into the gentle embrace of your bed tonight, feel how gravity holds you safely against the soft mattress, creating the comforting weight of blankets across your body. This invisible force, so constant we rarely notice it, shapes every moment of our existence with a pull so gentle yet so fundamental that removing it would transform our world into something magical and strange. Tonight, we'll explore the fascinating thought experiment. What if gravity simply disappeared? Not as a catastrophe, but as a window into understanding the elegant physics that normally cradle our daily lives. Gravity is perhaps the most intimate force in the universe, yet it remains beautifully mysterious. Right now, as you rest comfortably, every atom in your body is being drawn toward the Earth's center with a force so perfectly calibrated that you experience it as natural weight. This same force that keeps your feet planted on the ground is identical to the cosmic attraction that holds the moon in its graceful dance around Earth, that keeps our planet in its year-long waltz around the sun, and that binds entire galaxies in their slow, magnificent spirals through space. Think of gravity as the universe's gentle conductor, orchestrating a symphony of motion that spans from the smallest pebble to the largest star. When you drop a feather, gravity guides its lazy descent with the same mathematical precision that governs Jupiter's massive orbit. This force doesn't discriminate. It treats a grain of sand and a mountain with identical attention, pulling each toward Earth's heart with an acceleration that remains beautifully constant at 9.8 meters per second squared. The magic of gravity lies in its universality and its subtlety. Unlike the sharp crack of thunder or the brilliant flash of lightning, gravity works in whispered consistency. It never takes a moment off, never varies in its fundamental nature, never grows tired of holding your coffee cup firmly on the table, or keeping the atmosphere wrapped around our planet like a protective blanket. Every breath you take is made possible by gravity's gentle insistence that air molecules stay close to Earth's surface, creating the pressure that fills your lungs with life-giving oxygen. Consider how gravity shapes the most mundane moments of your day. The satisfying weight of a book in your hands, the way water flows downward from your faucet, the natural settling of your body into a comfortable chair. All of these experiences are gravity's quiet artistry at work. When you walk, gravity provides the resistance that makes each step purposeful, creating the familiar rhythm of heel-to-toe contact that your muscles have learned to navigate with unconscious grace. But gravity's influence extends far beyond our personal experience. It sculpts the very landscape around us, carving rivers that flow toward the sea, creating the spherical perfection of raindrops, and determining why mountains reach toward the sky while valleys cradle gentle streams. The great trees outside your window grow upward in defiance of gravity's pull, their roots spreading deep into the earth in response to this same force, creating a beautiful tension between earthward pull and sky-seeking growth. On a grander scale, gravity is the architect of cosmic structure. It gathered the primordial hydrogen clouds of the early universe into the first stars, and continues to forge new suns in stellar nurseries scattered throughout space. It shapes the elegant ellipses of planetary orbits, maintains the delicate balance that keeps Earth at just the right distance from the Sun for liquid water to exist, and orchestrates the tidal rhythms that have pulsed through our oceans for billions of years. The mathematical beauty of gravity emerges in its simplicity. Newton discovered that this force depends only on mass and distance. The more massive two objects are, the stronger their mutual attraction, and the farther apart they are, the weaker that pull becomes. Einstein later revealed that gravity isn't truly a force at all, but rather the curvature of space-time itself, like a bowling ball creating a depression in a stretched rubber sheet. Both descriptions capture the same elegant truth. Gravity is the universe's way of making matter attract itself, creating order from potential chaos. As you lie here tonight, surrounded by gravity's constant embrace, imagine the vast network of gravitational relationships extending outward from your body. You are gently pulling on the moon, just as it pulls on you. Your mass contributes to Earth's gravitational field, and Earth's gravity reaches out to influence every comet in the outer solar system. This is the profound interconnectedness of the cosmos, a web of attraction that links every particle of matter in an endless dance of mutual influence. The thought of gravity disappearing might seem frightening, but tonight we'll explore it as a meditation on the physics that normally remain invisible around us. By imagining its absence, we can better appreciate its presence, the way it provides structure to our world, creates the familiar sensations that ground us in physical reality, and maintains the cosmic order that allows stars to shine, planets to exist, and life to flourish in the gentle cradle of gravitational stability. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let yourself feel grateful for gravity's tireless work. It holds you safely to your bed, keeps your room anchored in place, and maintains the atmospheric pressure that sustains each peaceful breath. In our upcoming journey through a gravity-free world, we'll discover not destruction, but rather a deeper understanding of the elegant physics that make our ordinary, gravity-bound existence possible. The first moments of weightlessness. Imagine as you rest peacefully in your bed tonight that gravity simply fades away, not with violence or chaos, but with the gentle silence of a dimmer switch slowly turning down. The first sensation would be extraordinary, the feeling of weight lifting from your body like a burden you never knew you carried. Your muscles, accustomed to working against gravity's constant pull, would suddenly find themselves free from that familiar resistance, and you would begin to float upward from your mattress with the graceful slowness of a soap bubble rising through still air. This initial moment of weightlessness would feel remarkably similar to slipping into a perfectly warm swimming pool, where water's buoyancy cradles your body and allows you to float effortlessly. but instead of water supporting you, it would be the absence of gravitational pull, creating a sensation of liberation so profound that every cell in your body would seem to exhale with relief. The constant downward pressure that has accompanied every moment of your life since birth would simply vanish, replaced by a new kind of freedom, the freedom to exist in 3 dimensions without the tyranny of down. As you float gently upward, your blankets would begin their own lazy dance, separating from your body and drifting away like soft clouds dispersing in a breeze. Watch them in your mind's eye as they unfold and ripple in slow motion, their fabric no longer pulled taut by weight, but instead flowing in gentle, hypnotic waves. The pillow beneath your head would lose its compressed shape, expanding back to its natural form as it joins you in this aerial ballet, rotating slowly as it rises toward the ceiling. Your room would transform into something magical, a 3-dimensional space where every surface becomes equally accessible. The ceiling, once distant and unreachable, would become simply another wall you could gently push off from to navigate through your floating environment. Dust motes that normally settle onto surfaces would hang suspended in the air like tiny stars, creating delicate constellations that shift and swirl with the slightest movement of air currents. The silence would be profound and different from any quiet you've experienced before. Without gravity, objects would no longer settle, creak, or fall. The subtle sounds of a house adjusting to gravitational stress, the gentle settling of wooden beams, the whisper of curtains hanging against walls, would fade away, replaced by a new kind of stillness. Even your own movements would become nearly soundless, as your feet would no longer strike the floor with each step, but instead allow you to glide through space with the fluid grace of an underwater swimmer. Books on your shelves would begin their slow drift away from their confining spaces, pages fluttering open as they tumble gently through the air. Imagine watching your favorite novel perform a leisurely somersault across the room, its pages spread like wings, words visible in glimpses as it rotates in the soft light. Papers on your desk would lift and separate, creating a slow-motion snowstorm of documents and photographs that dance around each other in elaborate, intersecting orbits. The water in any glass or cup would behave in ways that seem almost magical. Instead of remaining flat and level, the surface tension would draw the liquid into perfect spheres, creating floating orbs of water that maintain their shape through molecular attraction alone. These liquid spheres would drift through your room like crystal balls, occasionally merging when they touch to form larger, more perfect globes, or sometimes splitting apart in a process as mesmerizing as watching raindrops race down a window in reverse. Your houseplants would undergo their own graceful transformation. Potted flowers would see their soil gently separate and float away in soft clouds of earth, leaving roots free to extend in all directions without the downward bias that gravity normally imposes. Leaves and stems, no longer needing to support themselves against downward pull, would relax into their most natural shapes, creating living sculptures that exist in 3 dimensions rather than fighting toward the light above. The familiar sensation of walking would be replaced by something far more graceful, a form of movement that combines swimming, flying, and dancing. By gently pushing off from any surface with your fingertips, you could send yourself gliding across the room in a smooth arc, your body naturally assuming the position of least resistance as you drift through the air. Stopping would require only the lightest touch against a wall or furniture, and you could change direction by exhaling forcefully or by moving your arms in gentle, swimming motions. Even the air around you would behave differently, without gravity to stratify it into layers or create convection currents. The atmosphere in your room would remain perfectly still, unless disturbed by your movements. Your breath would create visible streams of water vapor that maintain their shape longer, spreading outward in spherical clouds that expand and dissipate with mathematical precision. The psychological effect of this weightlessness would be as profound as the physical sensation. The part of your inner ear responsible for detecting gravity's pull, the organs that normally tell your brain which way is up, would suddenly have nothing to report. This might initially create a gentle disorientation, like the moment between waking and sleeping, when you're not quite sure of your position in bed. But rather than being alarming, this sensation would quickly transform into a kind of meditation on spatial awareness, as your mind learns to navigate a world where every direction is equal and every position is equally valid. As you float in your transformed room tonight, suspended in the gentle embrace of weightlessness, you would discover that movement becomes a form of slow motion poetry. Each gesture sends ripples through the floating objects around you, creating chain reactions of gentle collisions and graceful separations. This is physics as dance, where Newton's laws of motion take on visible, beautiful form in the dreamlike interactions of weightless objects, finding their new equilibrium in a gravity-free world. When water defies expectation. Tonight, as you rest safely in your gravity-embraced bed, let your mind drift toward one of the most mesmerizing transformations in our weightless world, the breathtaking dance of water, liberated from gravity's downward insistence. Water, which has flowed downhill for billions of years, obeying gravity's call with liquid obedience, would suddenly discover entirely new ways to exist, creating displays of physics so beautiful they would seem like magic sculpted from the laws of molecular attraction. Imagine stepping into your kitchen in this gravity-free morning and turning on the faucet. Instead of the familiar downward stream that normally flows into your sink, the water would emerge and immediately gather itself into perfect, crystalline spheres. Surface tension, that gentle molecular handshake that normally creates the meniscus at the edge of a glass, would become the dominant force, pulling each drop into the most mathematically perfect shape possible, a sphere. These liquid orbs would hover in the air like living jewels, some as small as pearls, others growing to the size of tennis balls or even larger, depending on how much water joins each floating community. The sink below, no longer needed to catch falling water, would watch as these liquid spheres drift away on invisible air currents, occasionally bumping into each other with the soft grace of soap bubbles meeting. When two water spheres touch, they don't bounce apart like solid balls. Instead, they perform a gentle merger, combining their masses into a single, larger sphere, with barely a ripple disturbing their unified surface. It's as if they're old friends embracing after a long separation, their boundaries dissolving to create something larger and more perfect than either was alone. Venture outside in your imagination and witness how this weightless world transforms the entire water cycle into an aerial ballet. Rivers, no longer compelled to seek the lowest point, would lift themselves from their beds like liquid serpents awakening from ancient sleep. The Mississippi River, the Thames, the Nile, all would become floating ribbons of water, maintaining their general shape through the cohesive forces between water molecules, but now free to drift and undulate through the air in massive, sinuous curves. Lakes would transform into the most spectacular sight of all, enormous spheres of water, hovering above their former beds like liquid planets. Lake Superior, freed from its earthly basin, would gather itself into a sphere nearly 8 miles in diameter, rotating slowly as it floats through the atmosphere. The water's surface tension would work overtime to maintain this colossal ball's perfect roundness, while fish and aquatic plants trapped inside would suddenly find themselves in a 3-dimensional underwater world where up and down lose all meaning. The ocean, that vast body of water that covers most of our planet, would undergo the most magnificent transformation of all. No longer held in its basin by gravity's insistent pull, seawater would begin to separate from the Earth's surface, gathering itself into an enormous sphere that might hover like a second moon in our sky. This ocean sphere, perhaps 1,000 miles in diameter, would become a floating world unto itself, complete with whales gliding through its center, schools of fish creating living galaxies within its depths, and currents flowing in 3-dimensional spirals that follow the physics of fluid dynamics rather than the constraints of an ocean floor. But perhaps most enchanting would be the small-scale water phenomena that would surround you in this weightless environment. The morning dew that normally clings to grass blades would instead float freely as tiny, perfect spheres, creating a constellation of water pearls that drift through the air at knee height. Rain, if clouds could still form without gravity's help in gathering water droplets, would no longer fall. Instead, precipitation would manifest as floating fields of water spheres, each raindrop maintaining its perfect roundness as it drifts horizontally on air currents, occasionally joining with others to create larger and more magnificent liquid orbs. In your bathroom, a hot shower would become an otherworldly experience. Hot water emerging from the showerhead would immediately form into warm, floating spheres that hover around you like a gentle constellation of liquid comfort. You could push through these floating droplets, feeling them break and reform around your body, creating a 3-dimensional bathing experience where warm water envelops you from all directions rather than simply falling from above. The steam from hot water would behave differently too. Without gravity to make warm, moist air rise, water vapor would simply expand outward in perfect spheres from its source, creating halos of mist that maintain their shape and density much longer than the steam you're familiar with. These vapor spheres would drift through your bathroom like gentle clouds, occasionally merging or dissipating as they encountered different temperatures or air currents. Coffee and tea would become meditative rituals in this weightless world, Pouring hot water into a cup would create a floating sphere of liquid that maintains the coffee's temperature through the minimized surface area that a sphere provides. The coffee would rotate slowly within its invisible container of surface tension, steam emerging not upward but outward in all directions, creating a perfect halo of coffee-scented vapor around each floating cup sphere. Water's behavior in weightlessness reveals something profound about the molecular world that usually remains hidden beneath gravity's influence. Surface tension, normally just a curious force that lets water striders walk on ponds, becomes the primary architect of liquid form, the hydrogen bonds between water molecules, those tiny electrical attractions that hold H2O together, suddenly take center stage, demonstrating their power to create and maintain complex, beautiful shapes without any help from gravitational compression. Perhaps most wonderfully, this weightless water world would be entirely silent, in a way that earthbound water never can be. No splash of waves against shores, no babble of brooks over rocks, no patter of rain on rooftops. Instead, the only sounds would be the gentle whisper of floating water spheres brushing against each other, or the soft pop of smaller droplets merging into larger ones, a soundscape as peaceful and meditative as the visual spectacle itself. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, with gravity's familiar embrace holding you safe, let your mind float among these dancing water spheres, where physics becomes poetry and molecular forces create liquid sculptures that defy every expectation we have about how water should behave. The dance of floating worlds. As you settle deeper into the comfort of your gravity-secured bed tonight, let your mind expand to contemplate the grandest transformation of all in our weightless universe, the gentle dissolution of worlds themselves. Without gravity's binding embrace, Earth would no longer be able to hold itself together as a single unified sphere. Instead, our planet would begin a slow, graceful dance of separation, breaking apart not with violent destruction, but with the serene inevitability of a flower releasing its petals into a gentle breeze. Imagine watching this transformation from a peaceful vantage point high above, perhaps floating alongside the International Space Station, which itself would no longer orbit but drift in a straight line through space. From this celestial perspective, you would witness Earth beginning to expand, its surface slowly stretching and separating as the internal pressure that gravity normally contains starts to win its ancient battle against gravitational compression. The process would unfold with geological patience, taking days or weeks rather than minutes. First, you might notice the atmosphere beginning to escape. That thin blue shell of air that normally hugs our planet's surface would start to dissipate into the vacuum of space like breath on a cold morning, but in reverse. The aurora that normally dances at the poles would expand outward, painting the entire expanding atmosphere with sheets of green and blue light as solar particles interact with our planet's magnetic field on an ever larger scale. mountain ranges would begin their own majestic journeys. The Himalayas, the Rockies, the Andes, these great peaks that have stood as monuments to geological force, would gently separate from their foundations and drift apart like massive stone ships setting sail on invisible seas. Mount Everest might float serenely past the pyramids of Egypt, both now untethered from their earthly moorings, rotating slowly in the vacuum as they follow their individual trajectories through space. The continents themselves would undergo the most spectacular transformation. Africa might drift away from Europe with the same gradual grace it once used when separating millions of years ago, but now accelerated and visible to the human eye. North America could pirouette slowly as it separates from the Atlantic Ocean, which itself would be forming into that massive sphere we imagined in our previous journey, suspended somewhere between the floating land masses like a liquid planet keeping watch over its former shores. But perhaps most beautiful would be the fate of our cities and human settlements. New York's skyline would maintain its familiar silhouette even as it drifts away from its bedrock foundation. The buildings and streets held together by the material's own molecular bonds rather than gravity's pull. The Statue of Liberty might find herself floating above the harbor, still holding her torch high, but now truly free in a way her creators never imagined, liberated not just symbolically, but literally from the gravitational bonds that once anchored her to her pedestal. The moon, Earth's faithful companion for billions of years, would finally be released from its eternal orbit, no longer captured by our planet's gravitational field. It would continue along the tangent it was following when gravity disappeared, a straight line that would carry it away from Earth at about 2,300 miles per hour. From our floating vantage point, we might watch it grow smaller and smaller, like a ship disappearing over the horizon, but heading into the infinite ocean of space instead of the familiar curvature of Earth's seas. This lunar departure would be strangely poetic, as the moon has been slowly spiraling away from Earth throughout its existence anyway, pulling away at about 1.5 inches per year due to tidal forces. Without gravity, it would simply complete this ancient journey instantly, following the path it was always destined to take, outward toward the stars, carrying with it the history of its gravitational dance with our world. The sun, our local star, would face its own magnificent transformation. No longer able to hold its massive bulk together through gravitational compression, it would begin to expand like an enormous slow-motion firework. The nuclear furnace at its core, currently contained by the immense pressure of layers upon layers of stellar material, would find itself free to spread outward. Rather than the violent explosion you might imagine, this would be the gradual brightening and expansion, as if the sun was slowly taking off a heavy coat it had worn for billions of years. Jupiter, that giant among planets, would undergo perhaps the most dramatic change. Its massive atmosphere of hydrogen and helium currently compressed into bands and zones by enormous gravitational pressure, would simply evaporate into space like cosmic steam. What we now see as the Great Red Spot, a storm larger than Earth itself, would dissolve into wispy tendrils of gas that would spread across millions of miles, creating new nebulae from what were once planetary atmospheres. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, that ring of rocky debris that never quite formed into a planet, would suddenly find its members free to wander wherever their momentum carries them. Some asteroids might drift inward toward where Earth once orbited, while others would head out toward the outer solar system, creating a slow-motion diaspora of rocky worldlets spreading throughout our cosmic neighborhood. Saturn's rings, those magnificent bands of ice and rock that have enchanted human observers for centuries, would slowly expand outward like ripples on an infinite pond. Each tiny particle in those rings would continue along its own trajectory, creating an ever-widening spiral of glittering debris that might eventually span the entire solar system, with gossamer threads of ice crystals catching and reflecting sunlight. The beauty of this cosmic dissolution lies not in destruction, but in liberation. Each component of our solar system, from the smallest grain of dust to the largest planet, would finally be free to follow its own path through the universe, unbound by the gravitational ties that have defined cosmic architecture since the beginning of time. It would be like watching a vast three-dimensional sculpture slowly come apart, each piece revealing new angles and relationships as it drifts away from the whole. From your safe position here on Earth tonight, held secure by gravity's gentle but firm embrace, you can appreciate the profound organizing principle that this invisible force represents. Gravity is not just what keeps you in your bed or makes objects fall. It is the cosmic architect, the force that gathered the scattered matter of the early universe into stars, planets, and galaxies. It is the sculptor that carved order from primordial chaos, creating the structured cosmos we inhabit. As you drift towards sleep, consider the magnificent irony. By imagining the absence of gravity, we discover not emptiness or destruction, but a deeper appreciation for the elegant physics that make existence itself possible. In our floating world, every separated mountain, every drifting continent, every liberated moon would be a testament to gravity's usual power to bind, to hold, to create the stable foundation upon which life, consciousness, and dreams can flourish. Life in the weightless realm. Tonight, as gravity cradles you in its invisible arms, let your mind explore perhaps the most wondrous aspect of our weightless world, how life itself would adapt and flourish in this new realm of possibility. In this peaceful thought experiment, imagine not the struggle for survival, but rather the magnificent creativity of living things suddenly freed from gravity's constraints, discovering new forms of existence as graceful and unexpected as a ballet performed in 3 dimensions. Consider first the trees outside your window, those patient giants that have spent their entire existence in a constant battle against gravity's downward pull. In our weightless world, they would undergo a transformation as beautiful as it is profound. No longer needing to invest enormous energy in building thick, strong trunks to support their canopy against gravitational stress, trees could redirect that effort into pure growth and beauty. Their branches would extend equally in all directions, creating perfect spheres of leaves and flowers, living planets of chlorophyll that drift through the air like green stars. A mighty oak, freed from the tyranny of up and down, might grow into a shape resembling a three-dimensional snowflake, with branches radiating outward from its center in mathematical precision. Each leaf would orient itself individually toward any available light source, creating a constantly shifting kaleidoscope of green as the tree rotates slowly in space. The root system, no longer anchored to earth or searching downward for water, would extend in graceful tendrils that might interweave with other floating trees, creating aerial forests connected by living bridges of root and branch. Flowers would discover entirely new expressions of beauty and weightlessness. Without gravity to dictate which way their bloom should face, roses might open their petals in perfect spherical arrangements, creating floral orbs that capture light and release fragrance in all directions. Sunflowers, no longer compelled to track the sun's movement across the sky, might develop multiple flower heads, radiating from their stems like living fireworks, each bloom free to face whatever direction attracts its attention. Imagine gardens that exist in 3 dimensions, floating ecosystems where plants grow not in neat rows bound to the ground, but in complex, interwoven spheres and spirals. Vines might connect floating trees in graceful arcs, creating tunnels and chambers of living architecture through which you could swim through the air. The very concept of a garden would expand from a 2-dimensional plot of land to a 3-dimensional space of living art, where flowers bloom at eye level, root systems create intricate sculptures, and the boundary between earth and sky disappears entirely. Birds, those creatures already blessed with the gift of flight, would discover that their new weightless world has made every living thing their equal in the air. But rather than competition, this might create the most spectacular aerial ballets ever conceived. Flocks of birds would no longer need to fight gravity to stay aloft. Their flight would become pure artistry, using their wings not for lift, but for precise navigation and expression. A flock of starlings might create 3-dimensional murmurations that extend upward and downward as well as horizontally, forming living sculptures that change shape in impossible ways, like thoughts made visible in the air. Fish, suddenly finding that air and water behave more similarly in the absence of gravitational stratification, might discover they can swim through both mediums with equal ease. Dolphins could leap not just above the surface of the ocean, but soar through the atmosphere for miles, breathing air while maintaining their elegant swimming motions. Schools of fish might migrate through the sky, their silver scales catching sunlight as they navigate between floating water spheres and aerial coral reefs that have adapted to exist in 3 dimensions. For land animals, the transformation would be perhaps most remarkable. Elephants, no longer burdened by the need to support their massive weight against gravity, could move with the grace of whales, swimming through the ocean. Their movement would become a form of slow, majestic dance, each step sending them gliding forward for great distances. Cats would discover that their natural grace and balance translate perfectly to weightless navigation, allowing them to push off surfaces with the gentlest touch and sail through the air with precise control. Their tails serving as perfect rudders for 3-dimensional movement. Humans would experience perhaps the most profound adaptation of all. Our bodies, evolved over millions of years to function in Earth's gravitational field, would gradually adapt to this new freedom. Our sense of balance, currently dependent on detecting gravity's pull, would evolve to become more sensitive to motion and spatial relationships. We might develop new forms of communication based on 3-dimensional gestures, as pointing up or down would lose all meaning in a world where every direction is equal. human movement would become a form of slow motion, swimming through air. Children would be the first to master this new form of locomotion, pushing off walls and furniture with delighted laughter as they sail across rooms in gentle arcs. Adults might learn to move with the fluid grace of underwater swimmers, using subtle movements of arms and legs to navigate through their three-dimensional living spaces with precision and beauty. Sleep itself would be transformed. No longer would beds be necessary to provide support against gravity's pull. Humans might sleep, floating in the center of their rooms, rotating slowly like peaceful planets in the gentle currents of air circulation. Blankets would wrap around sleepers like cocoons, held in place by static electricity and air pressure rather than gravitational weight. Communities might form in entirely new ways, with homes and buildings designed as three-dimensional spaces where people can access any surface with equal ease. Cities could grow, not just outward and upward, but inward and through, creating complex architectures that exist in all dimensions simultaneously. Transportation would become unnecessary for short distances. People would simply push off from one building and glide to another, turning every journey into a moment of flight. Perhaps most beautifully, human relationships would be expressed in this new dimensional freedom. Couples might dance together through the air, rotating around each other in complex orbits like binary stars. Families could gather in floating circles, holding hands while suspended in the center of their home. Each person's position in space as meaningful as their emotional connections. The silence of this weightless world would create new opportunities for life to communicate in subtler ways. Without the constant sounds of objects falling, settling, or being pulled downward by gravity, living creatures might develop enhanced sensitivity to vibrations, chemical signals, and the gentle movements of air currents. Life would speak in whispers, touch, and the poetry of movement through three-dimensional space. Tonight, as you rest safely in gravity's embrace, imagine this weightless world not as a place of struggle, but as a realm where life discovers new forms of beauty and connection. In the absence of gravity's constraints, existence itself might become more graceful, more interconnected, and more aware of the delicate forces that bind all living things together in the gentle dance of life, moving freely through infinite space. The universe unbound. As you rest here tonight, in the gentle security of gravity's endless embrace, let your consciousness expand one final time to contemplate the ultimate transformation, how the entire cosmos would unfold when freed from gravity's organizing influence. This is not a story of ending, but of the most magnificent beginning imaginable. As the universe discovers new ways to express the fundamental beauty that has always existed beneath the surface of gravitational order. Our solar system, that family of worlds that has danced together for billions of years, would begin its own graceful dissolution. Each planet, no longer held in orbital bondage to our sun, would continue along the path it was traveling the moment gravity disappeared. Mars might drift toward the constellation Orion, carrying with it the history of ancient riverbeds and polar ice caps, a red wanderer bearing the geological stories of a world that once might have harbored life. Venus would sail in another direction entirely, perhaps toward the bright stars of the Pleiades, her thick atmosphere slowly expanding into space and creating a trail of sulfurous clouds that might stretch for millions of miles behind her, like the tail of an enormous comet. Earth itself, as we've seen, would slowly disperse into its component parts, but even in separation, these pieces would carry the incredible legacy of 4 billion years of evolution. Floating continents might serve as arcs, carrying ecosystems through the cosmos, while the sphere of ocean water could become a wandering world where marine life continues to evolve in ways never before possible. The Moon, now free to pursue its own trajectory, might eventually pass close to other solar systems, becoming an ambassador from our corner of the galaxy, bearing on its dusty surface the footprints of the first humans to walk on another world. The Sun, our local star, would undergo its own magnificent transformation as the nuclear fire at its core expands outward without gravitational confinement. Rather than the catastrophic explosion you might imagine, this would unfold as a slow, beautiful brightening that could last for months or years. The Sun would become a gradually expanding sphere of light and energy, its surface cooling as it grows larger, perhaps transitioning from its current yellow warmth to a gentle orange glow, then to a deep, comfortable red that would provide soft illumination to any nearby worlds lucky enough to witness this stellar metamorphosis. As our expanding Sun grows larger and cooler, it might eventually become a sphere of warm, diffuse light the size of Earth's former orbit, a gentle giant that glows with the accumulated fusion energy of billions of years, slowly dissipating its heat into the cosmos like a campfire burning down to peaceful embers. This would be stellar death, not as violence, but as the ultimate expression of generosity, as our Sun gives back to the universe all the energy it has accumulated over its long lifetime. Beyond our solar system, the effects would ripple outward through our galaxy in ways both dramatic and beautiful. The Milky Way, that vast pinwheel of stars that has maintained its spiral structure for billions of years through gravitational choreography, would slowly begin to unwind, like a spinning firework in reverse. The spiral arms would gradually straighten and disperse, sending streams of stars flowing outward in all directions through intergalactic space. Each star, freed from its orbital dance around the galactic center, would continue along its individual trajectory, carrying with it any planets, asteroids, and comets that molecular and electromagnetic forces could still hold together. The night sky, as viewed from any surviving world, would gradually change from the familiar constellations that have guided navigators for millennia to an ever-shifting tapestry of moving lights, as nearby stars drift past each other at their various speeds and directions. Some stars might find themselves traveling together in loose groups, stellar nomads that happen to share similar velocities and directions. These chance companions might journey through the cosmos for millions of years, providing each other with gravitational company, even in a universe where gravity can no longer bind large structures together. Binary star systems, held together by forces stronger than the gravity we've removed, might continue their intimate dances while traveling through space like cosmic waltzing partners crossing an infinite ballroom. The supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, that mysterious gravitational giant that normally holds hundreds of billions of stars in orbital submission, would find its realm of influence dramatically reduced. No longer able to capture and hold entire solar systems in its gravitational web, it might become simply another wandering object in space, though its immediate vicinity would still be shaped by the intense curvature of space-time that defines its existence. Galaxy clusters, those vast communities of spiral and elliptical galaxies bound together by gravity across millions of light-years, would begin their own gentle dissolution. Andromeda, our nearest large galactic neighbor, and currently approaching us for a collision billions of years in the future, would instead sail past at a safe distance, its own stars dispersing as it travels through the expanding emptiness between galaxy groups. On the largest scale, the cosmic web, that magnificent three-dimensional network of galaxy filaments and dark matter that currently gives structure to the observable universe, would slowly fade away. The great walls of galaxies that stretch for hundreds of millions of light-years would dissolve into streams of individual stars and stellar remnants, each following its own straight-line path through an expanding cosmos that grows more uniform and peaceful with each passing eon.